All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us this afternoon to talk about applied uses of AI for conducting some data analytics work. My name is Zach Lewis, and I serve as Rio Salado College's Associate Dean for Institutional Research. I was approached and asked by Gordon Inman with Rio and the district's AI Resource Center to help to facilitate today's session in thinking through how we could expand some capacity and leverage some of these tools to help to support ongoing analysis efforts around the system. I'm joined today and co-presenting today's session by Michael Tyler, who's the Director of Institutional Research at Paradise Valley College. Thank you so much, Michael, for graciously letting me rope you into this and kind of co-presenting some of this today. So let me share my screen and we'll get into what we've got prepared. Okay, so today's session, as the title and some of the details in the newsletter suggested, is all around how can we leverage some of these new tools that we have at our disposal to create some additional value out of the resources that we've got available. I would hope that it comes to no surprise to all of you that every college has an embedded analytics function. It might be called institutional effectiveness on your campus, institutional research, some combination of those things. And we're busy at work producing lots of reports and dashboards and other resources that are at your disposal to help you make smart decisions based on the data that we have available. There is no shortage of content out there, and so it can be difficult at times to know which things are best to use, how to interpret some of what's in there, how to glean additional insights beyond just what you see in black and white on your screen. And so today's session is trying to think through how might you take those next steps. Specifically, this is tailored with a non-IR, non-IE, non-technical user in mind, and thinking through how you all, kind of outside of our function, might be able to leverage artificial intelligence tools and the data that we produce for you to be able to do some things like interpreting the data, as I see here on the slides, writing up some nice summaries that you might be able to help support some conversations and planning activities on your campuses, helping to generate additional questions based on the data and the trends that you're seeing, and generating some hypotheses that could lead to projects and recommendations, and really just exploring all of the rich assets that you have available to you. What we're not focusing on today, selfishly, is not AI as a replacement for institutional research functions. We want to try and really nail down the point of being very mindful and careful about how you're interacting with these tools, especially with respect to what types of information you're providing. And so, just to kind of put a point on that, not uploading student record level data into any of these things. And we're not really going to get into how these things are created or maintained and/or how you could use them to really engage in more advanced type of work. But thinking of it, more as a tool, a thinking partner, as we have it written here, to help support your interactions with data resources that are at your disposal here in the district. So here we have some practical use cases that could be thought of as options and how to go about applying some of these examples that we're going to share today in your day-to-day work. Many of us around the system are tasked with engaging in planning efforts, trying to establish baselines for different things, trying to understand what the context is both in and outside of the district. And so these types of tools can be helpful with those types of scenarios, as well as using them to interpret and interact with existing resources. As I mentioned, there's no shortage of resources out there, and arguably an overwhelming amount of reports and dashboards. And so, how can you leverage tools like artificial intelligence, LLMs, to try and identify what those patterns might be suggesting to you, helping you uncover what some of the recommendations might be, and then lead you to being able to engage with your local communities and stakeholders to unpack some of those findings. Um, a common task that we have within our scope of work is generating some brief summaries, executive narratives, etc., condensing really technical and sometimes overwhelming amounts of information into something that's more bite-sized and approachable for your average user. And so while we're of course happy to support those types of things within our functions, using tools like these might help to expedite that process for you on your end and give you quicker access to some of those quick wins that you might be looking for. And then, for me personally, one of the things that I have found most interesting with this is in doing things like environmental scanning and trying to better understand the context in which our institutions are situated, being able to synthesize information, both internal and external data, and create a little bit more of a seamless interaction between different things has been really helpful. You know, Especially as it pertains to things like peer benchmarking and trying to understand trends that might exist in the labor market or the broader economic conditions that we're helping to educate students and support their transition into. Being able to pull from different sources and quickly synthesize all that information is a really powerful option in leveraging some of this technology. But of course, that all comes with some restrictions. So with great power also comes great responsibility. And for today's purposes, I think we're really trying to frame that around just being very mindful and intentional about how you're interacting with these things and how you are providing different data and resources to them. The two tools that we're going to focus on specifically today are Gemini and NotebookLM, which are two AI platforms that are licensed within Maricopa under our Google licensing. There are, as many of you know, lots and lots of other things out there. And so as you are interacting with these things, we're just encouraging you to be as careful as possible. Hopefully it goes without saying that things like student names and ID numbers, social security numbers, and dates of birth, or any combination of these things shouldn't go into any of these tools, anything that can be used to identify a student on the back end. I would even go so far as to say until further policy is brought forward within the system, that even trying to do things like anonymized data or kind of rehashed IDs and things is probably something that you want to avoid until we get further guidance and support from the district office team. So even in our licensed environments, just careful how you interact with them and be mindful of the data that you're supplying to them. So just extending on that point, additional things that you might consider steering clear of are things having to do with HR personnel records, anything that could jeopardize students' privacy or confidentiality around things like disability resource services or different accommodations that they might be privy to. Financial aid always is top of mind, with being respectful and mindful of all the regulatory requirements that exist around sharing data that's connected to student financial aid eligibility and or disbursements, just to ensure that you as a user are steering clear of any trouble. So some best practices and useful suggestions. Many of these tools offer the ability to toggle off or opt out of different data sharing and or model testing settings. So we would encourage you to avail yourself of those features. There are tools that we have licensed to us where that functionality doesn't really exist because they're platforms that you're authenticating into, and those types of features aren't enabled. But for things that you may be interacting with that don't fall under the approved quote unquote tool sets that we have available to us, please be mindful of how you're interacting with these things. And that's a great way to just protect yourself and the data that you might be using. Also, many of us are, just a second, Laura, thanks. Many of us are leveraging third-party platforms, using confidential materials and proprietary information. So I would just encourage you, again, to make sure that you are being mindful of any sort of data sharing agreements that you might have in place with those third-party entities, ensuring that the data that you're using falls under permissible and acceptable use case scenarios. Laura, go ahead.
Maricopa has a list of all the AI related um, uh, software that we have.
Hmm.
And so, but they weren't quite organized how I wanted it. So the URL that I shared um, has it kind of sorted by learning and research tools, graphic tools, and that's mostly what they had was these organizations. But there were a couple of things, and then a couple of emails came out about like Gemini and NotebookLM that weren't listed on the site at the time. So I shared that link with you because we really have a lot of AI related software applications that are available.
Yeah, I
Do
think.
you want me to share that or can you just
Yeah, I
click
opened
on?
it up on my end, and I believe everybody else should have access to it in the chat as well. Um, I'll be candid to say that in my role, I'm not as closely connected with the policy decisions that surround which tools are and are
Right,
not acceptable. So I'm basing all of my interpretation on and the suggestions that we're making in today's session on the email that had come out recently,
right,
specifically identifying Gemini Notebook and Google Studio as the preferred solutions.
right.
Although I'm sure that that's subject to change and more policy will be forthcoming.
But I just wanted to share that district has a site with that left column that
Mhm.
shares what the resources are, and I was impressed.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Gordon, I mean, not to put you on the spot, but is there any, insight that you can help to provide here?
Um, Actually, could you send me the link on the district site that you said has all this stuff? Because we don't actually have a list as far as I know. And so I wanted to check at it because like the um, the only ones that the district IT um, has officially supported are Gemini. And I think Adobe falls under it, the AI inside of WebEx. Um, but like Copilot, technically speaking, from their point of view, it's available for people, but it's not officially supported, and it may go away at some point in time.
Right,
So that's I'd just like to kind of see where that original list was that you got, so I could look into it a little bit more and see exactly. Because it would be great if we had a list, because a lot of the things you have on there, I think, are good platforms and everything. I just want to confirm
right,
everything.
Yeah, thank you both for that. I mean, I think the best way to characterize it is that it's still very fluid, right? And there's lots of evolving policy and decisions that are being made, across the system with respect to which tools, acceptable use case scenarios, et cetera. And so hopefully what we're going to be sharing today are things that are in compliance with those messages that have come out and will help to keep you safe as individual contributors should you choose to engage in this type of work. Um, so in addition to, some of the considerations around data privacy and acceptable data use, um, it comes with the territory and, it's not revolutionary to think of the fact that, many of these tools are quite sophisticated, but also quite prone to incorrect assumptions, providing details that might not be factual, creating resources and citations that may not exist. And so, as always, with any of these things, we just really encourage you to take those things into consideration, especially where it pertains to requesting, any of these tools to conduct any sort of tabulations or calculations. Some of the examples that we're going to show today have that uh, type of structure built in where we're asking it to do maybe a little bit more than just reading what's written on the dashboard. Um, so we just encourage you to kind of cross-check those things, making sure that you're doing a little bit of due diligence on your end to ensure that whatever you're getting out is valid and relevant. So that way, if you are going to pass it along, ultimately it looks good on you that you're, providing information that's accurate and credible. We also want to the extent possible, try and avoid influencing the output of the model to the extent possible with introducing our own biases and subjective understandings of things. Oftentimes that will be necessary, especially if you're trying to dig into a particular point that you want to unpack or look at something from a particular lens. But as the example that we have on the slide here, rather than using language that might be deficient in kind of mindset, we're trying to opt into more affirmative language that helps to really unpack to the extent possible the breadth and scope of what might be going on in the data that you're interacting with so that you can get the most value out of the work that you're doing. And so to that end, we've come up with a bit of a framework, very much influenced and helped along the way with the use of AI to help to create a mnemonic device for you all to be able to remember some of the guidelines and best practices with respect to prompting, especially as it relates to trying to create really strong, robust evidence using the data that you have available to you. And so we've come up with this data prompting framework, the D in data standing for defining the context. So you want to make sure that the model that you're interacting with understands kind of the nuts and bolts behind what's going on, who, what, where, when, and why, how should it frame the responses that it's giving to you so that you're using information that's relevant and contextualized to our use case. Then we want to add the data. As we mentioned, probably a little profusely at this point. We're really recommending only leveraging aggregate data. Many of the resources that you all have access to as kind of end users within the system have a lot of rich aggregated trends and metrics and things that you can use to your advantage to be able to conduct some of this work. And so we're really just trying to, at least for today's session, insist that we steer clear of including student level records. The T in our data framework is telling the model what your ask is. And so giving it specific instructions on what you want done with that information, and then asking for formatting. So I want an executive summary, I want a bulleted list of recommendations, whatever that might be. And so there's an example prop down there below, and you can see all of those different elements that are included in to that prompt that accurately define for the tool what the focus is, what the data are that you're providing to it, what you're looking for in terms of the analysis that it's going to conduct, and then ultimately what you're hoping to receive back as the output from that chat. And so there's lots of other resources out there that provide similar types of frameworks, but given the unique nature of today and trying to have you walk away with something that's easy to remember, hopefully this will be helpful for you to get started with on your end. Okay, so I'm gonna be quiet for a little bit and hand the baton over to Michael, who's going to walk us through a couple of applied use cases using Gemini.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. Michael Tyler over at Paradise Valley. So we're going to do a walkthrough, some examples, and then have the opportunity to demo this yourself, just to really drive home some of the things we've been talking about before this. So we are, in fact, we have that email from a couple weeks ago. Oh, let me go ahead and share my screen. Stating that Gemini is now available in our Google Suite. I think some of you have probably seen where it shows up now in the right-hand corner saying Ask Gemini. You can integrate it into things like your email and your calendar. If you haven't had a chance to play with it yet, I was just going to point out real quick, you can get to it like you'll get to any of your other Google apps anywhere in that upper right-hand corner. Takes you straight to the Gemini screen and functions much like any other LLM where you can ask questions. So I'm going to throw a couple of dashboards into our chat as well. So if you want to follow along or have questions, I'm going to be working with the, let's see, going to be working with the awards dashboard here for Maricopa, and the headcount dashboard is another good one. I picked both of these simply because they are aggregate level data. This falls under the same concept that we were talking about before. You're not putting anything that's plAI, any student individual information in there, but you can still use these to get a summary and or insights into it. So we have the Gemini open. The Maricopa awards trend is a dashboard provided by district. Going over from about 10 years ago, the number of awards we're giving by different degree type. So your CCLs, your associates, and now starting to be the bachelors. And so what I did is took a screenshot of just this data for all of Maricopa. If we go back to Gemini, just as a potential workflow, you can either press the plus button here to add files or just drag and drop whatever data you're putting in there, which now has that. I have a couple pre-made prompts. This is following the same data format that Zach was talking about. You want to set the context, be specific about what you want out of them. So at the moment, letting you know that we're a community college, data contains trend types for the past 10 years. And specifically, I'm looking for more generalized trends. This is something that these LLM models do pretty well. They can find you generalized trends. They do really well with writing narratives. They are not great at being exact or doing calculations. And I'll show you that example here in a second. But so I've asked it to give general highlights of the awards offerings, how they've changed over the past 10 years, both a summary and then to break it out by COVID, before COVID, COVID, and after, because that's often something we get asked about in the IEIR. All right. The results of which, and I'd encourage you when you see these things, I said that it does really well with highlights and general trends. You still need to go back and verify after the fact to make sure this is truly what's in there. But it's a great way to quickly digest new information. So it talks about a net increase overall from 10 years ago to now, where we have more awards. But there's been a shift towards the short-term certificates and introduction of bachelors. Going into more specifically by the different trends, you can see how it shifts at each point. So pre-COVID, we're stable, COVID, big drop, and then growth. And interestingly, it talks about the fact that while we have now increased the number of overall awards, the percentage of them being AAs has declined. And so there's been an increase in the CCLs and bachelors. So overall, we're kind of shifting as a system away from the general AA and towards more of a workforce short-term certificates and bachelor's programs. So looking at that dashboard, what's nice about this one, it does have that same visual graph. And so we see that dip during COVID it's talking about. We see as a percentage of our overall award population, we do see green here as the certificates is growing. The number of AAs in the blue here is shrinking as a percentage of the overall. So just gut check, being able to go back and verify this seems to be fairly reasonable. And so that gives you a nice little summary that can be easy to start as a discussion point, especially in a meeting. If you guys bring certain resources, you want to have a jumping off point. It could be a quick way to digest a dashboard. If you get to this dashboard and see this and don't know what's going on, if you don't have the time to analyze it yourself. Again, this is all aggregate data where it does well. The other one I want to show you, if we do the same dashboard, and I'm going to upload that same picture, as well as I took a screenshot of Paradise Valley's data during that same time period, the number of awards. And I wanted to see if they had the same pattern. So if I ask it, again, setting the scene, this is community college data and community college district. Using this information, I want to see how they correlated together, the rise and fall of AAs and CCLs and CCLs and AJAX. I want to provide an interpretation, and very specifically, I want the correlation coefficients. I want to calculate what these values are. And hopefully this works all right, because I've tested this a couple times and got the rough answer I want. We'll see if it actually works with people watching. So you see here, it's gone in and it actually scrapes the table data out of those images. And so it is created a table from that flat file that we can copy out, which honestly could be a really useful data prepping tool if you have like a PDF and want to get tables out of there. All right. And so the results of which we're seeing here that at Paradise Valley, and a quick refresher on correlations. Correlations are how two variables are associated with each other. So it goes from -1, which means they're perfectly negative correlated. So as one increases, the other one goes down. To 0, there's no relationship between them. To a +1 is as one goes up, the other one goes up. So here it's saying that at Paradise Valley, it's very barely as the CCLs went up, the AAs went down, versus at the district is incredibly strong negative relationship. There's a very strong signal there saying, hey, as AAs went down, CCLs went up. Ajax, they both went up at the same time. Anything above like a 0.4 is a moderate correlation, moderately positive. So we're saying, hey, this is a decent signal. These two are going up together. And so it gives a little bit of a breakdown of the inverse relationship, the positive correlation, all of these things. Where I want to caution you, though, if I run the same thing and ask it to give me a step-by-step correlation calculation, these are not math models. They do really well at identifying trends. They do really well at summarizing information. They do not actually calculate anything. Very specifically, it tries to ballpark it. Unless you ask it specifically, I need you to show me the exact calculations. So when you're using these types of things, I would hesitate to do anything statistics heavy, anything complicated. General trends are great, but I've actually run this a couple times and had the results completely shift. Okay. So this one's not as bad. Remember we had a -0.08. So in the original one, when it was ballparking it, we were saying there was a very slight inverse relationship at Paradise Valley between the rate of CCLs and AAs, how they changed over time. Now it's slightly positive. Both of these decreased quite a bit. It went from 0.8 down to 0.67, and I think it was also like 0.8 down. So it's good at ballparking. It is not good at doing exact numbers, but it will very confidently tell you that those are right. And unless you have the expertise or know something else going on there, you can very confidently take that wrong answer back. So I just really wanted to point out how that can work. This particular thing, we wanted this to be a lunch and learn with a little bit of like a hands-on. So if you have, we're going to take a little bit of time now for people to play with this as well. I put another dashboard in there with aggregated data. If you have a different dashboard, with aggregated data you'd like to look at, we're going to take a couple minutes so people can try this while we're on, and we can answer questions while you do it. And then we're going to come back and discuss the results, surprises, things like that.
There's a hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I don't see that. There we go. Laura?
I'm very willing to trust AI to return articles, article summaries, anything that's reading, writing related. But when it comes to math, I get gun shy. So I'm looking at your complex formula and saying, how are you proofing that the formula is working? Because AI isn't good at math and it hallucinates.
So in this particular example, before this, I went ahead and calculated all of those so I knew what the right answer was. So it was incorrect the first time. Second time, it does end up incorrect. My point to that was less so use it for this math so much as a very concrete example of it doesn't actually do math typically. What it's doing is predicting patterns, predicting the next thing next to it. So if it's summary, if it's something like you have those aggregate data and you ask for trends, it does all right with that. But shouldn't be a finished product. This is a rough draft. This is helping you research something. This is starting discussions. This is not, I'm making a final product that I'm delivering.
And we understand that, but that's not what our students understand. They're just seeing it as quick and dirty. But when I first started using ChatGPT like 3 years ago, and I had them do an assignment, and I showed them how it didn't know how to do the sum. So we were trying to simulate in ChatGPT what we did as an Excel assignment. Next semester, it knew how to do sum, and it grows and builds, but you got to be proofing it.
Mhm.
And I can't remember if you had said it in yours, but something I was reading the other day was, do not return any hallucinations, somebody said to put in your chat GPT query or things like that. But math is where I'm really nervous about it. Whereas any kind of, I'm writing an article or I want to develop a course design, AI is wonderful.
It can be really good in that way. Fermin, you have your hand up?
Yeah, what I wanted to add was this fact that is not in the presentation, right? When you write a prompt, you can specify which direction you want the analysis to go. In other words, you have to somehow establish some kind of guardrails to prevent in this case, it's not, if Gemini is actually sending the info to the model and the model is replying to Gemini and Gemini is showing the information to the user, right? But in this case, let's say, for example, you're doing data analysis, Gemini is throwing some correlation coefficients. If you are not ready for that kind of interpretation, then you could specifically tell them, do not give me this type of analysis. I want my analysis to be going in this direction. And that will prevent the model from giving you information that you might not understand. Another thing to keep in mind is tell them specifically, if you cannot do the analysis the way I ask you, do not do it or don't do certain parts. And this is why Mike's point is well understood. It is an iterative process where you will create a prompt and it might not give you what you want, then you rewrite the prompt and send the request again, right? It's usually a good idea to start with, you are, for example, and I wrote it in there, right? You are I don't know, data analyst, and in your role, I want you to do A, B, C, and D, right? Write me a summary or create me a file. It will do all those things, but you got to tell him. If you don't tell him, it will throw you all kinds of things that you might not even be aware of. And this is one of the risks when you're not having enough experience to go into interacting with these, applications. I mean, whether it's Gemini, whether it's Mistral, or whether it's ChatGPT, right? These are the things that as you go along, you have to learn how to fine tune how you prompt your questions and making sure that the questions that that the answers that you get are going in the direction that you want.
Yep. Otherwise, it will very confidently tell you it is doing it when it's not.
It'll make you believe stuff that you have no idea.
I had a very frustrating like hour and a half process where I was trying to get it to do a transcription, and it confidently told me it was running it multiple times, only for it to eventually break down and tell me it can't physically do that. So to your point, adding clearer language about its limitations, such as please tell me if you can't do this, things like that, can help with that overconfidence or the hallucinations. How you phrase the prompt is very important.
And also your tone, right? If you use let's say, well, I guess at our level, it's expected that we're going to write the prompts in such a way that they will be well written. So the answers that you'll get are expected to be well written also in a professional manner, I meant.
Hmm. All right. We got someone in chat. I uploaded the 10-year grade data for GCC and typed the following prompt. Act as if you're director of tutoring program, review the 10 courses. It gave me charts and top 10 courses. Nice. Did anything... Oh, there we go. Thanks, Zach. In doing that, was there anything that was surprising to you? Do you feel like the results you got from it were reasonable and or effective?
I think so. So what is nice about some of the charts that it included was the number of students that are taking the classes. So it not only looked at like, here's a class that, only 20 students enrolled, but had very, very low success rates, where really it's focusing on what's high enrollment, low success rate. So I think it's helpful, and it also confirms a lot of the work that we're currently doing. And then there's a few classes in here that we don't currently have tutoring for, so that might be a space to explore further. But yeah, I think overall it did a decent job.
Nice. I would just hesitate when you say confirms what you expect. Don't let that short circuit you verifying things. Because because it tells you what you want, you still need to go make sure. Otherwise, it'll be confident about anything. Did anyone else give it a try and have any results they want to talk about? All right. Still playing with it. Nice. So in your, was it Nuria? When you're talking about the fact they returned this to you and it helped, you're actually looking at it from the lens of like how was tutoring involved. That's where multiple sources of information become a little bit more useful. And you can upload multiple files, kind of like I put multiple screenshots in there. But there are also other options, like if you had a list of, say, classes you already had tutoring and ask it to try to help identify where there are gaps. That actually goes into the next demonstration that Zach has planned. Not to throw you under the bus, Zach, I was just looking at the time and trying to figure out how much
Yep.
time we had left.
Yeah, appreciate the segue. So we want to keep the train rolling here and introduce some alternative options for extending the type of analysis that you might do and introducing additional sources of content. And so we wanted to use that opportunity to feature NotebookLM as another tool in our district toolkit that we can leverage and use at our disposal to try and interrogate our data, contextualized and synthesized against additional sources that might help to kind of clarify the picture and bring in the additional perspectives. Oftentimes we get the question of, okay, you have this analysis and this data, but how does that compare? Or is this good? Yes or no? And so one of the easiest ways or best ways to go about trying to figure that out is to try and understand the context and what additional benchmarks and comparisons might be available. So NotebookLM is a little bit different than Gemini for those of you who might not be familiar, in that it almost functions as a closed system. You can upload lots of different content into a notebook, and then within that notebook, you can query the model to review the contents that you provided to it and give it specific instructions so that it can synthesize and contend with all the different inputs that you are providing. The model, of course, is trained, as many others are, using data from all over the place, but the benefit of Notebook is that it's not going to go out and reference and pull in things that might not exist, which is a common pain point that I know many people experience with using more chat style interfaces like Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. And so this is a way to kind of protect some of that to the extent possible and try and keep things contained as much as can be done. One additional thing that I particularly like about NotebookLM is the variety of ways in which it can provide an output. So of course it can do things like a nice report or executive summary, but it can also very quickly turn your content into audio overviews, very intriguing and engaging podcast conversations that will quickly fool you into thinking that you're listening to a real podcast. They've got new beta features to produce infographics and slide presentations and things. And so it extends some of the power and use case so that you can take advantage of some additional functions. So let me drag this additional screen over here. Hopefully you can see Notebook now. I always forget with the different platforms and switching screens and things, how one versus the other works. But so this is NotebookLM for those of you who aren't familiar. This is kind of what the interface looks like. Similar to how Michael showed with accessing Gemini, you can also access Notebook through your apps and things right here in your authenticated browser session. And so in order to do this, you just kind of create a new notebook and then it'll open up a new space for you to play around in. There are lots of different ways in which you can supply the information that you want to provide to it. And so as an example for today, what I've gone and done is very similar to the approach that Michael took with finding a couple of high profile, very commonly used dashboards that we have available. Sorry, I'm trying to find my resources hidden behind all the different screen sharing settings. Here we go. Gone in and found a couple of things, took screenshots similar to what Michael had done, and am ready to kind of load everything into my notebook session here. So I've got, for the purposes of this little demo, a couple of screenshots from one of the dashboards that's being used by the academic planning group, looking at different considerations around program enrollment and completion outcomes. So I'm going to toss those into my notebook. And then in addition to that, I'm going to add in some reports that I brought down from Lightcast, which many of you may know by former names, MZ or Burning Glass, have now kind of combined into Lightcast and provide us with a lot of rich labor market data to be able to just understand the context of how our institutions are situated. So in here, I've got trends on completers by program of study, trends by enrollments by program of study. I've got an industry overview report from Lightcast, which gives us some labor market data by industry specific to Arizona. I've also got occupation data from Lightcast and then program data from Lightcast, which gives us a little bit of insight into peer competitor statuses and trying to understand what other programs might be on the market in our local area that could be, kind of competing for that same space. So within here, it will quickly contend with all of what you provided and give you a little bit of a summary about what it's seen in the sources that you provided. And then from there, you can kind of use that as an early sign to just kind of validate and make sure that it's understanding what you're providing it so that you're on the right track. I went ahead and put together a couple of prompts based on our prompting framework that we've been talking about today. And so we're asking it to consider this data in the context of a large comprehensive community college system. We've let it know that we've given it 5-year summary trends on program enrollment and completion, as well as a variety of labor market reports. We want it to understand the relationship between our programs and trends that we're seeing in the marketplace, and then trying to identify some specifics that we're interested in. We're asking it to provide an executive summary, a list of 3 to 5 insights, and then some questions that can help to promote some further dialogue and conversation at your local level. So we'll give it a whirl and it'll go through its process and give us a little bit of insight here into what it is seeing in the data. When I tested this, it didn't take this long. So we'll see how long this particular example takes. While it's doing that though, so over here in this studio panel, you can see a lot of the features that I was talking about. So in addition, of course, to things like this executive summary that it's spitting out, there's a lot of just interesting features that it'll provide to you so that you can produce things like audio overviews, which includes kind of like that podcast functionality that I referenced, video overviews, slide decks, infographics, flashcards if you were trying to study for something. So a lot of interesting features that are available in here kind of by default.
I just want to clarify to the point that you just said it didn't take this long, because you can have a question, and because the way the model works, you might not get the same answer. That's another problem also.
Yeah.
I mean, it has happened to me that I ask the question and I get a different answer. So in that case, if you're building a history of replies, it might be a good idea to force the LLM to look at what it has done before and try to nail it to give you about the same answer. That problem is pretty common.
That's a good point. And, for this particular use case, this is kind of a novel inquiry, but it is something that, you can kind of take advantage of in other types of environments where you can try and get it to refocus its efforts, so to speak, on what it was already doing before. So as you can see here, this will, of course, kind of spit out a nice little summary that we've asked for, indicating that we've got some pretty strong alignment in our program mix with some of the core market features of our local economy, specifically thinking through things like healthcare and business related programming. It then, of course, then will provide some additional key insights into things where, program trends are in the right direction, things where there might be some opportunity for us to reimagine or refocus energies. And then prompting for some strategic questions that can help you then take some of those findings back and engage with your local community to dig into whatever the details of the analysis are that you're concentrating on. I apologize, this was like a little bit of a expedited overview because I wanted to make sure that there's some opportunity for hands-on practice. And so that was a quick little overview of how I have done this, but then I wanted to open up the opportunity for you all to engage in something similar. So I went and I grabbed a few different links, and I'll drop them in the chat once I can find it. And I would encourage you to maybe take a shot at this. You know, feel free to use what I'm giving, or you can grab your own as well. But this is kind of similar to what Michael had done with the awards trends data. And I'm looking at this headcount trends dashboard that's available from the district office. And so for my purposes, what I did for this was I took snapshots of fall 45th day data. I took snapshots of spring 45th day data, and then fiscal year trends. Uploaded all three of those into Notebook along with the two links that I just dropped, which are reports from the National Student Clearinghouse that examine enrollment trends within higher education and then breakdowns by sector, so that we can try and understand how do our Maricopa enrollment trends compare to our peers nationally, especially with the context that Michael had brought up before, pre-COVID, pandemic era, and post-COVID being such a big topic of conversation for many institutions around the country. So encourage you to give that one a shot and see what you might come back with. It was an interesting study to look at just because it is something that is very top of mind for a lot of folks right now, and something that we see often coming out from our district office colleagues when they're sharing updates and enrollment trends and things, and leveraging the clearinghouse as kind of that balancing point to understand the broader context. And of course, available for questions in chat as folks are playing around. Gordon, it looks like there might be a question for you in the chat.
So the training, we actually are working on that right now. It's going to be something that we have to develop, obviously, but we do, you know, like on the Playdates website that that Rio has been sponsoring over the past year. Like the first couple of sessions are, you know, about prompting. So it's a lot of the basic tool sets and like skills to help you get started. But in terms of writing on more effective AI prompts, that's something we're going to have to develop. I'm hoping we'll have a lot of this stuff, you know, developing over the summer. But yeah, so if there's anything that you would like to see done, like you mentioned, particularly data analysis and reporting, so we could focus on those types of things. So please feel free to send me an email or the AI Resource Center an email, and we can, you know, document that, okay, these are the things that people are requesting, and so we could try to bump those up higher inside of the priority list.
Thanks, Gordon.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, especially as we gain more and more access to these things, you know, having some best practices available. So just being mindful of time, we got a few minutes left. I don't know if anybody's interested in sharing a little bit about their experience. I know you didn't have as much time to work through the notebook example, just with the time that we have available today, but similar types of thoughts to the Gemini hands-on exercise is, just exercise caution with what you're getting back. Make sure that you go and validate to the extent possible what you're seeing. I would, similar to Michael, encourage you to not ask it to do more than what it's probably capable of, and just try and use it as, again, a thinking partner and framing it up around an assistant that can help you with documentation, summarizing, providing some brief insights that then you as the human subject matter expert take and interrogate for next steps. So yeah, with that, I just appreciate everybody's attendance, especially Gordon and Michael, and helping to support this today. Appreciate the opportunity to share, and hopefully this was helpful for everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.